Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the mind-boggling scale, the truly ingenious engineering, and the heartbreaking secrets behind a 17th century masterpiece. We all recognize the Taj Mahal, but very few actually understand it. We're going to explore how an empire at the absolute peak of its wealth poured its entire soul into 42 acres of marble, and we'll uncover the incredibly heavy price that was ultimately paid for that perfection. Okay, let's dive right into this by looking at the modern equivalent cost of building this marble wonder. If you wanted to commission this monumental structure today, it would easily set you back upwards of $1 billion. That's roughly 7.5 billion rupees. But the true cost wasn't just financial. This was a project that demanded the blood, sweat, and tears of 20,000 highly skilled workers, stonemasons, and artisans. And they didn't just clock in for a season. We're talking about 22 grueling, continuous years of labor. Section 1. Unique Wonder of the World. To understand exactly why this structure is celebrated everywhere as the seventh wonder of the world, we really have to look at the jaw-dropping architectural illusions engineered by the Mughals. Now notice the brilliant contrast here between visual tricks and highly practical engineering. When you first look through that main gate, the massive tomb appears incredibly close and just enormous. But mysteriously, it actually seems to shrink as you walk toward it. It's this brilliant forced perspective. Then, look at the four surrounding towers, the minarets. They look perfectly straight from afar, right? Well, they actually purposefully lean outward. Why? Because if a massive earthquake were to strike, those towers are engineered to fall away from the main tomb, making sure the central monument remains totally safe. Talk about breathtaking foresight. Section 2. Immortal Love and Deep Sorrow. So why go to such extreme, obsessive lengths for a single building? The motive isn't political at all. It lies in a profound and devastating tragedy. Let's trace this story back to 1607. Prince Khurram, who was the emperor's absolute favorite son, a guy literally weighed in diamonds and gold for his birthday, met a woman named Mumtaz, and they fell deeply in love. Fast forward a bit to 1628, and he is crowned Emperor Shah Jahan, which translates to Emperor of the World. The empire was at its absolute zenith, with Mumtaz as the guiding force behind the scenes. But then, just 3 years later, in 1631, tragedy struck. Mumtaz fell gravely ill and passed away while giving birth to their 14th child. The Emperor of the World, a man who commanded vast armies and unimaginable wealth, was utterly destroyed. He plunged into absolute emotional darkness. Historical accounts tell us he locked himself away and refused all food for 8 agonizing days. For 2 full years, he totally abandoned music, wore absolutely no perfume, and rejected all royal luxuries. A shattered heart effectively brought a global superpower to a standstill. And it all comes down to this crucial point: Mumtaz's dying wish. Before she passed, she asked for a tomb unlike any other in the world. Just that single sentence sparked an obsession that would entirely consume the rest of Shah Jahan's life, not to mention the immense wealth of his entire empire. Part 3. Making the impossible possible. Fulfilling that grand promise meant they literally had to fight nature itself. Construction began barely 6 months later, right on the unforgiving, soft banks of the Yamuna River. Think about it, building a colossal, incredibly heavy stone tomb on shifting river sand, that is basically a recipe for an engineering disaster. The moisture from the river should have completely ruined the foundation. But the Mughal engineers came up with this genius well foundation system. They dug incredibly deep wells all the way down to the dry, stable dirt. Then they packed those wells with stones and rubble, erected massive stone pillars, and get this, relied heavily on a literal army of elephants to stomp and compress everything down into a rock-solid base. And this next part really illustrates their mastery. Once that foundation was secure, they erected a staggering 40-meter dome. Today, we absolutely need complex steel structures and concrete to support something of that immense scale. But 400 years ago, they used nothing but perfectly calculated stress mathematics and solid stone. In fact, modern engineers still study these structural calculations today because they're virtually flawless. Section 4. The White's Magic of Makrana. With the impossible structural framework finally standing, it was time to dress the monument in a way that defied imagination. Shah Jahan was so fiercely dedicated to absolute perfection here that he legally blocked anyone else in the entire empire from buying premium Makrana marble until his monument was finished. He essentially monopolized the finest stone in the world. And then he organized a massive logistical operation using convoys of elephants to haul thousands of tons of this glowing white stone across 400 kilometers of rugged terrain all the way from Rajasthan to Agra. Now, to decorate this gleaming white canvas, the artisans used a technique called pietra dura. This isn't just painting a pretty pattern on a wall. This is the painstaking, meticulous art of cutting highly precious gemstones and embedding them right into the solid marble walls, so perfectly that they actually look like they naturally grew there.
And you are not going to believe how they kept those gems from falling out over 4 centuries. Modern lab tests revealed they secured these priceless stones using a bizarre but incredibly strong naturally derived glue. The mix? Molasses, lemon juice, and fine marble powder. It created a chemical bond so incredibly durable that modern restoration teams actually use this exact same ancient recipe today.
Because of that incredibly pure Makrana stone, the building feels practically alive. It magically shifts through 4 distinct breathtaking colors depending on where the sun is in the sky. It stands pitch black before dawn, blushes yellow and pink just after sunrise, gleams radiant pearl white under the midday sun, and transforms into a shimmering golden palace at sunset. Part 5. A tragic and painful end. So, after 22 grueling years of relentless labor, the architectural masterpiece was finally complete. But unfortunately, the story concludes with a remarkably bitter irony. Shah Jahan definitely achieved his goal of building the ultimate tribute to his beloved, but his unchecked, obsessive spending severely weakened the Mughal Empire's finances. The treasury was effectively drained. The once unstoppable empire was now teetering on the brink of financial ruin, and the political sharks were definitely beginning to circle. The downfall happened with staggering speed. The Taj Mahal was fully completed around 1654. Just 4 short years later, in 1658, capitalizing on the empire's weakened state, Shah Jahan was violently overthrown. And the kicker? The person who overthrew him wasn't a foreign invader, it was his own son. Shah Jahan was completely stripped of his titles and locked away. The former emperor of the world, the man who commanded thousands of elephants and possessed limitless wealth, spent his final 8 years as a captive in the Agra fort. His only comfort was a small window in his cell where he could gaze out over the river at the glorious masterpiece he had built and the resting place of his beloved wife, only ever able to view it from a distance. When he finally passed away at age 74, he was reunited with Mumtaz, buried right beside her inside the Taj Mahal. Which leaves us with this final, haunting question to consider as we wrap up this explainer. The Taj Mahal stands as humanity's most magnificent tribute to romance. But looking at the drained treasury, the toppled throne, and those lonely final years in a prison cell, did this ultimate tribute to love destroy the very man who willed it into existence? Thank you so much for exploring this remarkable story with me, and I hope you never look at the Taj Mahal the same way again.